Hello, welcome, Cabbage here. So here, let's make the transition from titling these videos as Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis Sales Reports to just general gaming news. I hinted at this at the previous video, link below. I'll stop reporting the monthly numbers for various mobile games. As we saw the last year, there's not a great change overall month to month. The perennial top earning games stay at the top. The games hovering around the shutdown danger zone stay hovering around the danger zone. The biggest news surrounding games really are when they release and when they shut down. Speaking of mobile game releases, Wuthering Waves came out recently and it was quite hyped, and it did have a very strong debut month, with one day at number 1 on the daily sales rankings. But it did not take number 1 on release day, and its sales have now dropped to about Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis level. Healthy, but nowhere near something like Genshin or Uma Musume. Even in its native Korea, it's barely cracking the top 100 sales. It's still early, so we can't assume that it will maintain at this level. It'll be worth keeping an eye on how it performs its first year. And then turning to shutdowns, specifically Square Enix shutdowns, the parade continues. Recently, Dragon Quest Champions, Dragon Quest Keshi Keshi, Tawatsugai, Triple Triad, a game on their Portal app which apparently features in Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis. I wasn't aware of it until now. It was going for like a decade, but now it is shutting down. And now, Final Fantasy Brave Exvius Global shutting down. We saw earlier this year that the global version of Dragon Quest Tact shut down, and I wanted to point out what I perceive to be the differences between these two situations. Dragon Quest Tact is very healthy with the JP version. Normally, it's at a level that is healthy enough to subsidize the running costs of a global version, and yet, they shut it down anyway. That says two things to me. Dragon Quest Tact Global had such low engagement that it wasn't even worth running, and/or Square Enix has stricter standards now in choosing to let a game continue or shut down. I think it was both in this case. With Final Fantasy Brave Exvius, however, this feels more like they're shutting down Global in order to help keep JP afloat. JP, Brave Exvius, has been skimming the danger zone for years. I would say their last good year of sales was 2020, and my guess for the lifespan of JP, Brave Exvius, is they are going to wrap up the current story arc and then shut it down. Folks more familiar with the game can tell me if that it will be this year or the next. And here we can take a moment to reminisce about Final Fantasy Brave Exvius. I played on Global from 2017 to 2020, and I still consider that period some of the best gaming I have ever experienced in any game on any platform. I recently played Dungeon Encounters, which shares an ATB-type battle system, and even fighting the last bosses, I was thinking, as good as this is, it does not reach the highest heights of FFBE. Up to the release of Gilgamesh Kai and the Esper Asura, the balance of challenge, complexity, and team build viability was amazing. It was some of the best feelings I've had in video games, where I could take a party of favorites and weirdos and figure out a win against a very complex boss. Super fun, super gratifying. The reasons why I dropped the game at Gilgamesh Kai and Asura were because I felt the jump and power creep was too high with the introduction of 7 stars. I didn't like that the game went even harder on the chaining system, which I always felt didn't belong in an ATB-style game. The developer handling of the global version was really poor the year leading up to when I quit, with mistakes and delays and bugs and dead times and tone-deaf decisions, and I didn't like that global was getting less rewards and handouts than JP. But thinking back on what I loved about the game, Chamber of Arms was awesome, the Esper fights were awesome, the rotating seasonal or limited time bosses were awesome. All these bosses with different patterns and attacks and weaknesses and immunities, and a lot of those changing during the course of battle, were so intricately designed, and I miss them, and it upsets me that they didn't design the bosses in War of the Visions to be like that. With War of the Visions, I eventually came to accept that the game was leaning into PvP, and PvE was more of an afterthought, and that led me to leaving the game. But when Final Fantasy Brave Exvius was good, it was the best. I will never forget the feeling of those battles, and I sometimes revisit my old clears. I have a playlist linked below. Sorry if the microphone in those videos was crappy. Finally, let's talk about Black Myth Wukong and some other games, and what their successes perhaps mean for the greater gaming industry in the big picture, and then the Japanese gaming industry in the smaller picture. I will not be playing Black Myth because it's not the type of game I want to play. I am old and my arms can't take button-mashy action games. That is why I played Nier Replicant and Automata on Auto Battle. Dark Souls is much more doable for me because battle is slower and more deliberate. And also, I like exploration. That's a big part of why I enjoy games now, which is what Dark Souls excels at and Black Myth does not. But for many people, Black Myth is great and the sales numbers prove it. What's interesting to look at is who is reviewing it. We look at the Steam user reviews, and the English reviews make up like 5%. I wonder what language the other 95% are written in. The point I want to make about that is that not only is Black Myth a Chinese-developed and published game, it is also aimed squarely at the Chinese market. Journey to the West is the most beloved IP in China, and sales are largely coming directly from love of and familiarity with the IP. The closest comparison that I can draw from my own life is being a longtime fan of like the Lord of the Rings books or the Marvel comics, and then seeing the movies in the theater and being like, these are so good. But yes, let's get to what does the success of Black Myth signal, along with the successes of games and models like Palworld and Genshin Impact. In a nutshell, the traditional Japanese way is looking outdated. Targeting just the Japanese market is not going to lead to as good sales as, say, Palworld, which did great in the West, or as good as Black Myth, which is tapping the vast Chinese market. Japanese developers and publishers either have to tighten their belts, creating just for the Japanese market, or they have to make changes to appeal to the worldwide audience, which it's becoming clear the Japanese are not good at. It's been tough to watch Square Enix flail, with trying to appeal to both the Japanese audience and the global audience, and end up in an awkward middle ground where they don't appeal in a big way to either, and we're seeing the fallout of that, as I explained in my previous video, again, linked below. The two Japanese video game company exceptions I see are Nintendo and From Software, who have threaded the needle of designing according to their uncompromising vision, and that vision translating worldwide. The answer for Japanese video game companies may lie in just be more like Nintendo and From Software, but easier said than done. And on the mobile side, Genshin Impact unlocked a new model for mobile games through sky-high production values and multiple platform compatibility that somehow sidesteps the stigma Japanese mobile games have outside of Japan. It has cracked that code to make a mobile model really successful in the global market. I've heard many times, why don't the Japanese just do that? And I keep saying, they won't. They could, but they won't. The Japanese are too worried about investing that much time and money into something not for console, and Japanese video game companies are stubbornly tied to the idea of their games on their consoles. So, as I previously predicted, the Japanese mobile market will not completely disappear, and Square Enix will not completely stop making mobile games, but the bubble there has burst, and the scene will shrink, while, for the time being, the Genshin model will continue to be successful. So, in short, as I keep saying, the Japanese games industry is going through a sea change, and I'll be here to keep an eye on it. But it's no coincidence that I am choosing to retire from mobile games at this timing. I'm seeing the sea change. Alright, that'll do it for this video. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again. Take care.